Hello, join me and my cat Treasure as I continue to share with you my stories from the mission field. So last time I talked about how my parents went from hippies to Jesus freaks to missionaries, and how our first step in missions was this training that we did in Skid Row, Los Angeles, in helping to start a church among the urban poor. So the next thing that happened was we moved to Hong Kong for a year. We didn't know it was going to be a year. We thought it was going to be long term. So we moved there in August of 1989, and we moved there August of 1988, and we returned to the States in August of 1989. So at this time, we went to work with Jackie Pollinger with St. Stephen's Society, spending a year in her Christian detox program, which was quite an extraordinary program. So basically, she went into this part of Hong Kong. It no longer exists. That was essentially the projects, if the projects weren't policed. This place was called the Walled City, and I actually never physically went in. They deemed me and my youngest sister to be too young, but my mom, dad, my brother, my oldest sister would take weekly trips into the Walled City to make contact with people who are struggling with addiction, poverty, homelessness, trafficked women stuck in prostitution. And these people were assigned various living locations. So specifically the drug addicts would go to what they called a New Boy House, which is where we spent our first month in Hong Kong, was at a New Boy House on an island called Lantau in a fishing village called Dio. And what would happen there, this part of the ministry my parents were directly involved with, is that they would take turns praying over drug addicts in tongues 24 hours a day. They took shifts, and what they would see was young men, old men, who had been addicted to drugs, specifically heroin, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, come off of drugs completely in 10 days without withdrawal pain. So that extraordinary experience was what kicked things off. A child's eye view, my experience was maybe a little less intense. We had daily prayer and worship. I joined in for meals, and usually these young men came in, they were so super skinny from just using drugs but not feeding themselves. And so this month that they spent in the New Boy House or longer, they got an opportunity to regain their health. We would go swimming every day in the ocean. We'd go jump off this pier. It was a very challenging cultural experience for me as well, in that, so one of the specialties of this village is they made a sauce for Chinese cooking that is made out of fermented shrimp. And so in these villages, they would take the shrimp out onto these woven bamboo mats and let the shrimp dry in the sun before they began to ferment and put it into a paste. A very tasty food. I would much later learn I was not willing to try it as a 9-year-old kid, but the process of making it produced a rather unpleasant smell, to say the least. But anyhow, then after about a month there, the ministry moved us into the long-term recovery facility named Hengfu Camp, or Hanfok Yang in Chinese, which means the camp of blessing. So this camp, drug addicts who came into this camp would embark in a 2-year vocational training program that focused on giving them skills for construction work, was what they were learning at the time. And my dad became the head of that program, because in the States he'd been a carpenter and a handyman. He had a lot of skills. And so he would share those skill sets with the people there who were there in recovery. So as a child, my role was nothing big, nothing glamorous. You know, I was there for, you know, summertime. I played, I joined weekly prayer meetings. We all prayed for each other. So I did help pray for former drug addicts, prostitutes, that kind of thing. I joined in the meals. And apparently I would learn later that our family unit was part of another type of recovery for the individuals who were there who had never actually witnessed a healthy family. And that the ways that mom and dad parented us and the ways that we operated as a family unit was a huge model for them of how life could be. Very, very different from their involvement in Chinese mafia, in drugs, and all sorts of illegal and not particularly pleasant things. So during that period of time, I did make friends with a number of people. Some were other children whose parents were there too as missionaries, some local kids, and really probably the friends I made the most were all of these recovering drug addicts. And so on, that continued until we were homeschooled during the school year. The campsite provided us with a schoolroom. I have fond memories of keeping cool in the summer by joining the t-shirt factory that was silk screening t-shirts. That was another one of the vocational trainings there. Until they said no children allowed, understandably so. And then in the cooler months, Hong Kong is subtropical, so it didn't get super cold, but 40s and 50s with no indoor heat does get rather cool. And so I can remember keeping warm by sipping my mom's black tea. She'd have a big thermos she would fill with milk tea and doing schoolwork because I was in 4th grade and homeschooling did not stop. So that whole thing continued. And until we were going up on our 1 year, it was time to renew the contract. And I mean, there were some hard things about being there for sure, in that we were the first family to come, and then there was a second family that came after us, and the ministry was very much designed for singles, which made, you know, getting time off and getting time together as a family, we had to be incredibly creative. And mom and dad just weren't sure if this was the long-term environment that was right for us kids. And so they began considering other options, but a series of events, it seemed like other options were closed. And so we did not renew our contract with that ministry. Instead, we flew back to the States and proceeded in a 5-year gap. I'm sure my dad especially would describe it as a 5-year wilderness, because, you know, I know for him, he felt like he was supposed to stay in Hong Kong and maybe it was a mistake to leave. And yeah, it was tough. And I can remember telling people for a very long time, oh, you know, maybe we'll return to Hong Kong next summer. And it felt like it was never going to happen. I do have a few stories that you may find interesting of our experience in the interim that I will share in a future video. So I hope you enjoy these installments of stories, missionary life stories, and I look forward to sharing more.